haven't already watched it, please do go and have a look on our Facebook page, both either the Paranormal Experience page or the Amber Radio page, and you'll see the video of our visit to Winter's Gibbet. Now, it's quite an interesting story, Winter's Gibbet, in the fact of, you know, we went up there and we obviously had a look around, and it wasn't a very long visit because there's not really a lot there to do up at Winter's Gibbet. You know, obviously the gibbet is the place where he was hung, so that's where the activity would take place. The actual place that he's sighted at is said to be a cattle grid, but as I explained in the video, there is no cattle grid there, so they've either filled it in or, you know, we just didn't see where it was. But we got nothing. We had the spirit box out, we had the EVP, I visited the EVP, there's nothing there. Obviously the spirit box during the video never picked up anything, and you know, we never felt anything. It didn't feel like there was a presence there and whatever. So we never experienced anything. But you know, as I said in the video, that doesn't mean he wasn't there or has never been there. He just wasn't there on the night or just didn't want to speak to us. But I did say, because he's not technically, he wasn't executed on that site, he was executed in Newcastle, his spirit could be in Newcastle. Or, you know, you've got the fact of that there is no spirit there at all. You know, I've often wondered, it's the same when people leave flowers at the roadside. Very nice gesture, I can see that, etc. But is it something that a person wants to be reminded of? You know, the place where they died, or whatever, you know. If spirits do exist and they do come back and visit us, do they really want to come back and visit us where the, you know, do they want us to really to commemorate where they passed away? So has William thought, well, I'm not going there because that's the place where they displayed my body? Or, you know, did he just not there? So anyway, that was Winter's Gibbet. I keep calling it Winter's Gibbet, but it's pronounced Gibbet. And it was very interesting. I mean, it was still a good visit. Aaron and I went up there because Aaron was working the camera. So Aaron and I went up there. We do intend to go somewhere else. Ironically enough, just before I came on air, I was talking to Dave, and he was telling me about a location that we are going to recce and have a look at, and we'd be able to stay out a little bit longer in the next place because there's more to see and there's more area to cover, etc. As I say, Winter's Gibbet was a good visit. Sadly, we didn't get anything. We didn't get nothing on the EVP. We didn't get nothing on the EMF, and we got nothing on the spirit box. But it was still worth the visit. Both Aaron and I, as I say, we enjoyed the visit. In fact, Aaron got wrong off one of his friends because one of his friends wants to come out and do some ghost hunting with us, and Aaron never told him we were going on one on Saturday, so his friend wasn't very happy. So we've got to make sure that he comes on the next one as part of the team. But there we go. So I thought, as we're talking about ghost hunts, I would take you through a course on ghost hunting. You know, as I've said, there's no such thing as a qualification in ghost hunting or demonology or anything like that, but you can class yourself, after you've done the course, as being a paranormal investigator without even going out and doing a paranormal investigation. So by the time it's going to take a couple of weeks to go through the whole course, but I'm going to take you through a paranormal investigation course. So that's why I said in the Facebook post, make sure you've got a pen and a paper with you, because I'm going to take you through what it is to be a paranormal investigator. So the first thing we're going to cover is the symptoms of a haunting. Um, so when somebody tells you that they've had a paranormal activity at their house, or they've seen one, or whatever, there's a couple of things to consider, because the reports fall, and you've got to make sure they fall within the normal types of hauntings. Yes, there is types of hauntings. I mean, you would think there'd be a haunting was a haunting, but there isn't. There's different types of haunting. And so when somebody's telling you the story of, because, I mean, I know skeptic tends to be the word that's thrown around, but you've got to approach ghost hunting with a skeptic mind. There's nothing wrong with believing in the paranormal and being skeptical. And that's what tends to be the problem. And I've mentioned this on other shows. Sometimes you get people who everything's paranormal and they're completely non-skeptical about anything. Then you get people who point out stuff. I mean, I've mentioned Dave's video many times of how he said, well, it was a cat, and the woman gave him abuse, private message him and everything, and gave him lots of abuse about it couldn't be a cat, and this, that, and the other. And, you know, I haven't seen the video, so I can't comment and say whether, yes, it's a cat or not. But there's no reason to dispute Dave. So as far as I'm concerned, what Dave saw is exactly what it is. And the reason I believe Dave over the woman, apart from I know Dave and I know that he's genuine and what have you, but Dave's a believer. And if Dave turns around and says that something isn't paranormal when somebody's saying it is, then it mustn't be paranormal. Because Dave's the believer, and he's obviously the one that's, you know, doesn't try to convince me that stuff are paranormal, but, you know, he's the believer, so therefore he's going to believe whether it's paranormal or not. But, so, you know, you do hear a lot of stories from people about the paranormal, and sometimes you can instantly tell that they're not, and then there's others where it sort of speaks for itself, and, you know, you're unsure, shall we say. But anyway, so when interviewing somebody who has witnessed paranormal activity at their property or wherever, and you're trying to establish whether the goings on at the property are paranormal or not, you should consider whether reports fall within normal types of activities associated with the haunting. Of course, these rules aren't hard and fast, but they're a good guide to try to decide whether someone claims of the paranormal really are, or something out of the ordinary. So thinking about the claims in this way may allow you to quickly find out whether it's a non-paranormal activity or a paranormal activity, and give you some sort of explanation. So anyway, the first one is the general feeling of unease. Now, I mentioned this on the visit to Winter's Gibbet, that I didn't feel anything. Now they say when there's a spirit around, you could feel uneasy and what have you, but I didn't actually feel anything. So this can present itself in many ways. Witnesses may report feeling like they are being watched, or pick up some sort of negative vibe or atmosphere. They may also feel emotionally drained, upset, or even depressed whilst in a certain room or part of the property, or in a property as a whole. I know some people, and I have heard this, people say, oh, I don't particularly like this place, it's, you know, giving me a bad vibe. An open-minded investigation of the property will shed light on these claims. You should ask yourself whether the property is overlooked, which could result in the witness feeling exposed and watched. So in other words, if there's other things around, so if it's a house in the middle of an estate, are the people watching, and is that why they feel watched? Is it oppressive? Is it dark? Is it enclosed? These could all lead to negative feelings. I know if you go to some old buildings, they tend to be dark and dank and what have you. And if you remember a few months ago, we discussed natural born fears that we have. And I've mentioned this a few times about being scared of the dark. It's not the fear of the dark that we have, it's the fear of what lurks in the dark that we have. So you get a bit tense because you don't know what's in the dark. Like if you go on a ghost train, or you walk through one of these scary places, especially the ones with live actors, because you don't know what's going to happen, so you feel a bit tense all the way through it. And that's the sort of thing that you would get from like a dark and enclosed place. And does the witness have a history of depression or a current reason to be in this state of mind, such as a recent death in the family or a friend or something? So is that person of a clear mind, or are they suffering? Because sometimes you can see things. I couldn't sleep with the light on after my mother's passing, because every time the light was switched off I could see my mother. I don't for one moment believe she was there, but I could see it because obviously that was playing on my mind and whatever. Strange noises or voices. Noises such as knocking, banging, footsteps, slamming, scratching, or the sound of objects being dropped or moved are very common in paranormal cases. Reports of disembodied voices, whispering, crying, sobbing, laughing, and screaming are also common, as well as guttural moans and growls. Now, I mentioned this last night with one of the stories I was talking about, how a woman went to her friend's house and she could hear screaming, and yet there was nobody around. A disembodied voice, you can hear when you're in the house, when people walk past and they're talking. It's disembodied because you can't see the body that's actually talking. That's what it means. So it could be somebody passing, but if it's in a, such as Winter's Gibbet, I know I'm going to mention it a few times tonight, but it's because it's the most recent one that we did. But Winter's Gibbet is in the middle of nowhere. So if Aaron and I had heard voices, then there's a good chance it was the paranormal, because you can literally see for miles, which you'll see if you watch the video. And anybody approaching, unless they were actually crawling through the grass, you would have been able to see them. So if we'd heard any voices or getting any contact, then there's a good chance that it was the paranormal. So before conducting a full paranormal investigation, you should spend some time in the property. We did that on Saturday. We didn't just turn up, switch the camera on, and away we went. We did actually, have a good look around the area, check it out and whatever. The next place I'm going to, Dave and I was going to pay the visit before we actually paid the visit on the night time. It was probably the thing that we didn't do with the Welcome Tavern in Sunderland, and it's something we should have done. But that was our first ever investigation. We sort of didn't really have a clue what we were doing. Dave and Christine did, because they've been on investigations before, but I didn't, and we were doing it for the radio, so it was a slightly different thing than just doing an investigation. We interviewed the landlord, and whilst his story was very interesting, it had very little to do with the paranormal. And maybe we should have done the interview at another time if we knew it was going to go down that route. But we know in future that if we do go to somewhere and we interview somebody, that either to shut them off, respectfully, obviously. He was telling us the history of the place, but he did tell us a lot more than we needed, and rather than close them off, we wasted a lot of time on that interview, which meant we had very little time for the investigation, because obviously we were there for 5-6 hours, Although the investigation, if you watch, I think it's about 20 minutes, but we were actually at the building for about 5-6 hours, you know, all the setting up and this and the other. So yeah, so, you know, before you conduct a paranormal investigation, make sure that you've spent at least some time in the property. Now, it's always best to go during the daytime, and I've mentioned this before. The reason being is you can then see what the place looks like through the day. And you're not going to end up in a pothole somewhere or something like that. The reason being, as I say, you know, obviously to like sort of, you know, make sure there's no potholes, but also to see everything around there, so that if you see it on a night time, you're not, oh, that's paranormal. There was a picture shared recently in a paranormal group which looked like a monk in an archway. But then somebody shared a photograph of the same place from a slightly different angle, but during the day. And you could see that the monk shape looked like the shape of the wall that was behind this archway. Now, the person who took the photograph, who said it was paranormal, wouldn't have it, even though you could see the two shapes were exactly the same, in the same place, and so on and so forth. But the person who took the paranormal, or thought it was a paranormal picture, said that it wasn't the same thing, but it clearly was. And because they hadn't been through the day, when they saw this particular shape, they instantly thought it was a monk, because it was like an old monastery they went to, and they instantly thought it was a monk, whereas if they'd been through the day and took some photographs, they would have seen that it wasn't the case. So yeah, so, you know, that's also a good reason why to go through the day. Plus, spirits don't just come out at night. This is the fallacy that a lot of people have. Yes, it's easier to detect a spirit on a night time because spirits, the world around us starts going quiet, doesn't it? So therefore, it is a lot easier to have somebody hear or see something on a night time, because of the fact of the spirits would be there to, or would be easier to detect. But, you know, spirits don't always just come out at night. So if you're investigating a house, you should visit when the family are in. The children may be playing upstairs, the central heating will be on, and the kitchen in use, because then it gives the natural noises that's going on in the house. So, you know, you sort of know what's happening. I mean, if somebody coming to paranormal investigation in my house, they wouldn't find a lot of problem with dogs. Chrissy says that she's just going back to the day thing. Chrissy says she's been in Jedburgh jail during the day and had activity. Exactly. Activity isn't just defined, or, you know, isn't just nighttime. It can be any time. And as Christine says, she's been in Jedburgh jail. If you could expand on what sort of activity you had, Christine, but obviously she had some activity through the day. In observing the house in this way, you get the understanding of the normal sounds, as I said. So this could be things like the heating turning on, pipes expanding, creaky floorboards, or any electronic device. And the same technique can be applied to any type of building. It will be a good idea to observe an office building while in use, allowing you to hear the elevators and various pieces of the equipment in action. In a castle surrounded by tourists, you'll get a feel of how sound travels and echoes around the thick stone walls. So, you know, it is a good idea to go through the day, even if you're not do the investigation of the day, just to get the normal feel of the place that you're going to. Ed and Lorraine Warren, probably, you know, I mean, I've mentioned many times how I feel about Ed and Lorraine, but they used to set up cameras in graveyards through the day and record, and Ed tells a story about actually meeting up with somebody in a graveyard through the day. So they're very strong on you know, don't just go on the night time. So Chrissy says there was cell doors slamming when no one was near them, and some banging as well. Things that would have happened. I mean, Jedburgh Jail's closed now, so it, you know, so the activity wouldn't be the no, and you couldn't go there because obviously when it was open you couldn't go. I mean, there's a few places, there's a few prisons that are meant to be haunted but are still in use, and obviously you can't go to them when they're in use. But you know, Jedburgh Jail isn't. So, but they're the sort of normal noises that you hear: people banging on walls, on the bars, etc., and cell doors slamming, which is what you would get. So, and also, you know, if you, when it mentions echoes, so if somebody talks, I know there's a, I can't remember the building now, but there's a building where you go, and if you stand and say something at your normal volume of talking, the person directly opposite you on the other side of the building, and it's a decent sized building, I'll have to look that up of what it is, but if you say something normal, the person on the other side can actually hear what you said, even though there's quite a distance between you and you're not shouting. It's because of the acoustics in the building. So that's always something to have a look at. Strange smells or odours, which is another one you hear people say, oh, I went into this place and you know, there was this smell. Now obviously you need to rule out things like ozone smells. Now an ozone smell is the smell that you smell after a thunder and lightning storm, when everything's wet and, you know, this, that, and the other. And any other smell, you know, perfume. It's always a good idea that people don't wear perfume. I mean, I'll obviously still get washed and whatever, but you know, people don't wear perfume because sometimes perfume can be so. And often in haunted locations, it's said to have unusual smells. These can sometimes be unpleasant stenches, you know, but sometimes there can be perfumes, flowers, cigarette smoke. I know Steve, when he used to join us, he was telling us about every time something bad happened, he would smell the smoke, cigarette smoke, before it happened. I know Dave's mentioned about smelling the aftershave, Old Spice, which is what his granddad used to wear. If he was speeding and he was approaching a speed camera, and you know, it made him think what he was doing and ease off the gas. Chrissy said she had the smell of corned beef, right? Yeah, that's a bit strange. I mean, food is one of the smells, and it could be a link to that person. I mean, I love corned beef sandwiches, so you know, but not to the extent that people would associate corned beef with me. But having said that, if somebody really, really liked corned beef, and you know, it was their favourite food, etc., then you could maybe smell corned beef, and you'd be like, oh, that's our George, he loves corned beef, you know. So yeah, bear in mind that smells can drift in through the windows. Ventilation even through the foundation of the property if there is damage to the property structure and drainage. You should do all you can to eliminate the causes from your investigation. This can be achieved by simply closing windows, temporarily covering air vents, or turning off the ventilation or air conditioning units. And if you go through the day, then you'll know all this stuff. So Chrissy says it was as though someone had a corned beef sarnie and just walked past me. So there you go. So that person, maybe he's liked corned beef sarnies. He maybe took them to work with him with his bake, you know, and so he was associated with corned beef. And there he was walking around with his corned beef sarnie. But yeah, make sure you eliminate, and this is what I say to people. When they tell me a story, I start picking the story apart by saying, could it not be this? If you eliminate everything that I'm telling you now, then obviously, you know, as Sherlock Holmes once said, well, it was then Spock who said it in Star Trek, wasn't it? If you eliminate all that's impossible, then the improbable is what remains, or something like that. I'm probably getting that completely, I probably just completely butchered that saying, but you know, that's the sort of thing. If you eliminate everything, then what you're left with has to be the truth. So if you eliminate all the possibilities, i.e., you know, there's no food around, there's no perfumes, there's no flowers, nobody's smoking. But then you smell cigarette smoke or you smell perfumes or whatever. Because you've eliminated it, then it has to be something else. You know, or if, like, say, the windows are open and the smells are drifting through the windows, obviously if you eliminate all that, then it must be true. So, you know, take away everything, and then you'll find something. Now this next one actually happened to us at the Welcome Tavern. When I say us, it happened to Dave. But as I mentioned earlier on, I've got no reason to dispute what Dave said, because it was strange what happened. I didn't experience it, but Dave had a fluctuation in temperature. Well, Dave didn't, but the area Dave was had a fluctuation in temperature. Now, there's no reason to dispute that. The problem, going back to what we said about windows, ventilation, this and the other, we didn't actually check to see if all the windows had been closed beforehand and this, that and the other. So could it have been that, or could it have been a fluctuation in temperature? Now the temperature dropped quite severely, Dave said, and he was sitting, where he was sitting there was a radiator. Now I've mentioned this before, if you turn a radiator off, a radiator doesn't go from hot to cold. A radiator, because it's made of metal, the hot water is heated up the metal cools down, so it doesn't go hot to cold. So it has to cool down. But so there wouldn't be a drop in temperature. Yes, there'd be a change in temperature, but not a drop in temperature. And that's what Dave had. The fluctuation went from and being quite warm, because it was quite a warm building, to a drop. So, you know, temperature fluctuation. It is believed that unexplained cold spots are a sign that a spirit is present. And it only happened in this one spot. Nobody else in the building, in the Welcome Tavern that night, felt that fluctuation in temperature. So it could be present or even close to manifesting in a physical form. So did we, when Dave noticed it and mentioned it, and we all obviously went and Christine had the laser thermometer, etc., did we then scare it off? Was it trying to manifest itself into a physical form and we'd scared it off? And that's why we never discovered anything else. Could it have been it was coming through to us? We, you know, obviously started concentrating on it, and it was like, oh, I don't know, and backed off. You should be aware of not only cold spots on location, but also unexplained hot or warm areas, as this might also be the indication of supernatural presence. So if you walk into a room and it's red hot, like instantly red hot, because again, if I switch on a radiator, it doesn't become instantly red hot. If I was to turn on a fire, obviously fire is instant, but if I turn on a radiator, so if we use Welcome Tavern as an example, Dave's sitting on top of a radiator. Well, I mean, there was a chair there. He wasn't sitting on the radiator, but and that radiator was off, and then we switched it on. It would take time for the temperature to rise. If it was on and we switched it off, it would take time for the temperature. So it's not an instant thing, is what I'm saying. So if you go into somewhere and suddenly you get an instant hot or an instant cold, it could mean exactly the same. So before the instant investigation, you should take a baseline temperature reading throughout the whole property. Now, you're never ever going to be exact, because there could be things. But if you've gone around and you've eliminated everything, so you've took out, you've closed windows, you've made sure there's no ventilation open, made sure there's no fans blowing, etc. So if you took out everything that it could possibly be, then you take a baseline temperature reading of where you are, then obviously you're going to, and then there's a fluctuation in the temperature, then it's going to give you a better reading than what it would. And we didn't do that at the Welcome Tavern. We didn't take a baseline temperature of the place. And as I say, be aware of any temporary natural changes, so windows, this, that, and the other. You should also take note of potential sources of drafts like windows and ventilation, warm radiated pipes, boilers or heated ducts, as I say. Directly behind where Dave was a radiator, so therefore he shouldn't have felt cold, because he was, for want of a better word, in the warmest part of that room. Moving objects. Another common sign of a haunting is when objects move of their own accord. Usually they're unseen by the living, who go about the normal day. So things might move, but you've never actually noticed that they moved. This can include jewellery, personal belongings, everyday items. We mentioned a story last night about a guy who dropped his car keys in the back garden, and they were never ever seen again. We also talked about a credit card which was left on a table, or he believed that he left on a table. Looked everywhere, even on the table, couldn't find it, and then a couple of weeks later he found it back on the table. So we've mentioned this, and also we've done it ourselves, haven't we? You've put down your car keys or your house keys or something, and then gone back to where you believe it actually is, and it's not there. So is it something paranormal that's moving that? Doors opening. I mentioned last night about the door in my house and how you had to physically open it by pushing down the handle and then pushing the door. But it used to open on a night time. It doesn't anymore. And it's the same door. So there's nothing changed about that door. But it doesn't do it anymore. The lights turning themselves on, or even off. So objects or belongings may also disappear completely, as I say, only to reappear days or weeks later, in exactly the same spot as where they vanished from, the credit card on the table. Immediately before an investigation, it's a good idea to take as many photographs or as much video of the property as possible. This way, if you expect something has moved, you'll be able to check your photos or video to determine if there has been any movement. Now, we did actually do this at Winter's Gibbet. There's not really a lot that can move. The grass is pretty much it, or the gibbet itself. But we still did that. We still recorded Aaron took a few recordings and videos, of the area, just to, get a feel of it and whatever. I mean, it was more sort of so that he could get a feel of the camera and this, you know, it wasn't so that we had, because as I said, there's nothing happened with the gibbet, so therefore there was nothing to that we could say, oh well, you know, that stone's moved or whatever. Be aware that drafts and vibrations can cause objects to move and doors to close. So be aware of your surroundings. I know there was an investigation near a train station, and when they set up cameras and what have you, there was a statue. The reason being, I'll tell you the whole story rather than just the end of it. There was a statue in a shop that used to turn itself round on a night time. Yes, the gibbet is still there. If you watch the video, Diane, you'll actually see, because we stood next to the gibbet. So this statue used to turn around in this shop on a night time, and so they called in paranormal investigators. Now, these people that they called in were genuine paranormal investigators. This is the problem between genuine and, you know, kooks or whatever you want to call them. And the genuine is what we want to go down. If we see something, we see it. If we don't, we don't. That's what we've said all along. And they set up cameras and this, that, and the other. And they also set up vibration equipment. And they realised that the vibrations was caused by trains, because the camera recorded the movement of the statue at the same time as a train would pass. So the train would go past, vibrate, the vibration of the ground would turn the statue. So that's how they discovered. So that's what I'm saying about them being genuine. They were paranormal investigators, but they were genuine in, you know, the fact of the tale. There was another one, very similar case. Statue used to move on a night time. Again, set up the vibration equipment, camera and whatever, and it was due to people walking past that caused it. The statue moved at certain times when there was more footfall. No, it's not. It's not the same one. It's the third instalment of the gibbet. Just Diane's asking if it's the same gibbet that was that William Winter was hanging from. No, it's the third instalment of the gibbet. The first one originally rotted away with Winter's body, and but then almost 100 years later, it was replaced as a tourist attraction. In 1867, it was replaced. Now I could say watch the video, because I tell you all this on the video, but you know, anyway, and then that rotted away, and a new one. Well, he could be, but it is at the same place. So you know, he might not have come back to the replica, and that maybe is why he wasn't there, because it is in the exact same place as where the original was. So yeah, he could. But yeah, basically the story is he was hung up there. That both him and the wood rotted away. But there's also a bit of a folklore about the wood from the original gibbet, in the fact that if you had toothache and you rubbed it against your teeth, it cured toothache. Obviously we couldn't test that because the wood isn't there anymore, and nobody knows where well, obviously the wood's gone, because we're talking 1792 was when the gibbet was built. So everything's rotted away. But yeah, it was folklore that if you rubbed the wood from the original gibbet on your toothache, it would cure the toothache. There we go. I don't know what it was made of, the original one. So yeah, so make sure you check everything. So if something's moving, make sure that it's not just vibration. You know, if you put a glass on a table, I mean, if you can remember a few months ago, those who would listen regularly, I had a phone, my mobile phone was on the table behind me, and it jumped off the table. Nobody rang me, nobody texted, but it jumped off the table during the show. Could it have been vibrations? Well, it wasn't vibrations from somebody ringing, it wasn't vibrations from somebody texting, and it wasn't vibrations from movement, because as I've said, I live alone, and so there was no, if I'm sitting in the chair like I am now, then there was no, there was obviously no movement so causing vibrations. Physical contact. Now this is probably the thing that would scare me more than anything, is if something touched me. Some witness of paranormal experience the situation, or the sensation, sorry, of being touched or brushed against. This can also include the feeling of someone's breath on their skin. In rare occasions, reports of physical contact are much more extreme and have included reports of flicking, pinching, slapping, punching, or pushing. I notice I haven't got scratching in there, because scratching could also be a sign of it as well. During a paranormal investigation, the group should be encouraged to make themselves aware of their surroundings, because, you know, if you walk into something in the dark and, you know, it's like, whoa, hold on a minute, you know, I've been touched by a ghost, and then somebody switches a light on, you know, and it's a table, a coffee table or something like that, then you look like a right fool, don't you? So again, go through the day and make sure. Chrissy says she's had something walk straight through her and her son Richard at the same time. So yeah, so that sort of physical contact doesn't necessarily mean it has to be, if I touch you, then you know that I'm touching you, because we're both solid, so therefore, you know, we're touching. But if somebody walks through you, you could feel cold, you could feel, you know, you could feel the touch of something, but not actually feel the touch of something, as in, you know, physical contact like we would make with each other. So make sure, and this is why I keep saying about going when it's light, or going, getting you to know your surroundings, because you don't want to be bumping. I mean, apart from the fact of you don't want to be bumping into stuff and going, "Ooh, it's a ghost! Ooh, it's a ghost." What you also don't want to do is be bumping into stuff full stop. You know, there's nothing worse. I mean, there's a joke, isn't there, about your little toe of your feet being, you know, a furniture finding device. Because how many times have you cracked your little toe off a coffee table, or you know, the leg of a settee or a chair or something? Very, very painful. Now, I don't expect people to be doing paranormal investigation barefoot, but just make sure that that you have checked your surroundings. And manifestations. When a spirit or ghost manifests, it becomes a physical being or an entity. So this is where you actually can physically see what it is. The problem is it's very rare, but results in the sightings of ghostly figures, unexplained shadows, or moving shapes in the corner of your eye. Usually these shapes or shadows take human or human-like form. On rare occasions, these manifestations have been caught on camera or video and witnessed by multiple people at once. Possible non-paranormal causes for seeing manifestations could be shadows caused by non-accounted for light sources, such as a camera screen. How many times do you see a photograph, or do you see a video of somebody saying, is this paranormal? And then when you really investigate it, it's the shadow of something. So be careful when you do see manifestations, that it can't be anything else. As I say, always approach an investigation with a skeptic mind. And I know people who believe in the paranormal don't like that word at all, because they don't want to admit that they're skeptics. But it's always approached with a skeptical mind, Because if you don't, then literally you will be walking around somewhere going, "Ooh, it's a ghost, ooh, it's a ghost, ooh, it's a ghost," and it might not be. And it's embarrassing to turn around and say, "Ooh, it's a ghost," when it turns out to not be a ghost. There was a video shared once of a woman who had a child's arm on her leg, but it wasn't just a child's arm and then it sort of, became nothing. The arm went from the middle of her leg to the end of the picture, so you couldn't see what the arm was attached to. And she's like, I was sitting, reading me book or whatever she was doing, and this appeared on my lap. Well, it's your child putting their arm on the lap. Simple as that. And that's also the other problem with some of the paranormal stuff, is you've got a lot of people out there who fake a lot of it. It spoils it for everybody else. And it's one of the reasons, or one of the main reasons, that that I get very skeptical when I see people saying, is this paranormal? Because of that. Because of the fact of the there's so many people out there who, whether it's need for attention, whether it's the need to try and prove, because they believe in the paranormal, whether it's the need to try and prove that the paranormal exists, or whether it's just, as I say, to get some attention or whatever. But a lot of these paranormal groups, people will post something which, I took this picture of my daughter dancing, and in the background you can see somebody's face, and you can see it, but it doesn't mean that that's paranormal. You've obviously got pareidolia, which is where you look at a cloud and you see a shape in a cloud. Now, the human mind can't make faces. Sorry, the human mind only makes faces. I got that completely wrong. So the human mind has to make a shape out of something to make sense of it. So your mind all the time, every time you look at something, it's trying to make a face out of it, to make sense of it. So sometimes people see things which aren't there. So Chrissy says it can give you a glitter black mass which comes rushing towards you. I don't know what a glitter is, but a black mass comes rushing towards you. Obviously, is it the fear of the dark, and you're seeing something running at you, or is something really running at you? That's obviously what you have to decide. If you're somewhere and something happens, then you have to decide, is it, I'm so tense and I'm scared and therefore I'm starting to see things, or is it really happening? So that's why you need to relax, and that's why, and I keep harping on about this, and as I say, it's not just me, because Ed and Lorraine believed in this too. And if you're a believer in the paranormal, regardless of what you think of Ed and Lorraine Warren, they were, or still are, the big paranormal investigators, aren't they? Because, you mentioned Ed and Lorraine Warren in the paranormal world, and, everybody knows Ed and Lorraine Warren. They are probably the most world-renowned paranormal investigators ever. So, when they say check out a place, then obviously it must be the best way of doing it, because they were the experts. So yeah, so quite interesting things to take into account before you go on an investigation, because obviously what you want to do is you want to go to the investigation and get as much out of it as possible. So if you go through the day and have a look at the place, or even do the investigation through the day, there's absolutely no reason why you need to do it on a night time. Unless they say this person appears at 10 p.m. because it's pointless being there at 9 a.m. if it's known that this person appears at 10 p.m. But if not, then there's absolutely no reason why you can't do an investigation during the day. Now, we did Winter's Gibbet at 9 o'clock at night, which this time of the year is still quite light. We are intending to go back when it gets dark to do the whole infrared. We've got all sorts of equipment on order, infrared cameras. The problem with the camera we were using was it didn't really have a very good microphone on it. So we've also got like throat mics, which we've got on order. We've got a few things on order, which will come through before our next investigation. Now, on the video, I say our next investigation is 2 weeks' time. I have to apologise for that because it's not. I will let you know when our next investigation is, but it isn't in 2 weeks, because I didn't realise the date in 2 weeks, and Aaron is in a wedding, so obviously he can't be there. I mean, I could do the investigation myself, which isn't a problem. The problem with doing an investigation by yourself is if I see something but don't catch it on camera, and I say, oh, I saw a horse riding through here with a headless man on it, and I'm by myself, then it's me saying, I saw a headless horseman riding through here. Whereas if there's 2 years, and I go, Aaron, look, and Aaron also sees it, then I've got his backup. So try and do an investigation with somebody else, because you've then got the backup of that other person. Yes, there's going to be times where you see things and other people don't. But if you have the backup of another person, then you're more likely to be believed than the person who just makes it up. So what are the classifications of hauntings? So there's 6 types of hauntings which escalate in energy from seeing a shadow at the corner of your eye, which we've all done. I mean, I've seen many shadows in the corner of my eye, to a full-blown demonic haunting with intent. And these 6 groups cover all types of encounters, including seeing a ghost or spirit at home in a famously haunted location or a building where a tragic event has took place. And also, you've got that as well, Christine. Yes, Christine's made a good point in the chat room there. Speaking about your own safety, the problem is if you're on your own, you have an accident, you could be in trouble. Remember what I was saying about going and visiting somewhere early on to let you know if there are any potholes or anything like that. Even if you visit somewhere and there is potholes, and you set yourself a route so that you don't go through these potholes, there is always the chance of the potholes falling down. Just generally hurt yourself. It doesn't even need to be a pothole. You could trip on something, so as Christine quite rightly says, she would never investigate on your own, and absolutely not. You can, but it's not advisable, because of everything I've said, plus what Christine said about an accident. If you have an accident, you could end up lying there forever, and worst case scenario, you could end up passing away, simply because of the fact that you've gone by yourself and you've fallen into a hole. I mean, some people go to cemeteries and investigate, and if there's a freshly dug cemetery and you fall into it, it's 6 foot. That's quite a distance. Now, cemeteries, there is some cemeteries which are built near housing estates, but there's other cemeteries that are built nowhere near any housing estate. So you could be screaming that you're stuck in a grave. Plus the fact that you're in a grave, middle of the night, and you're asking somebody to help you and get you out. if you think about it logically, who's going to go into a cemetery to help somebody out of a grave? You know, so yeah, make sure that you always have somebody with you. It's always best. On the other side of the coin, you don't want too many people with you, because the more people you have with you, the more interference with the investigation you've got. Because what you've got is you've got obviously yourself would be making so much noise, you know, walking and stuff like that. You've then got the other person, like, such as when we went to Winter's Gibbet, there was me and Aaron, so, you know, I was aware of any noise that Aaron made, Aaron was aware of any noise that I made, so we could keep an eye on each other. Another person wouldn't be so hard, but once you get up to 10, 15, 20 people, then, you know, you've got lots of possibilities for the noises to be coming from them, and that's, you know, if we go back to this building that I was on about, where you can talk at one side and be at the other, if you've got 20 people and somebody says something at the back of these 20 people in that building, then it could be picked up by one of the other people, and you go, oh, I don't know, there's somebody talking, and it's not, it's just the guy at the back having a chat about his fish and chips something that he's going to have after the investigation. So make sure that you keep it small groups. The smaller the better. If you're going to record it, you need a cameraman. It's very difficult to record an investigation yourself, because you obviously, you know, you could have a GoPro on and you could record it and what have you. But if you want to live stream it, and that's the reason why I want to live stream the ghost hunts rather than just record them. Sadly, we had to record the one at Winter's Gibbet, but we've also looked into that and investigated how we could, you know, next time we go live stream it, because we've looked at a portable Wi-Fi unit, so hopefully that would help us next time. So yeah, so just, I mean, I will go through equipment that you need as well, but you know, just make sure that the group's reasonably small so you can capture everything. So as I say, you know, depending on how you're going to do it, if you're going to do it like we did it, where you're presenting the information about the area and what have you, and you have somebody recording it, there's two people at least. Depending on how you're going to, I mean, we need a third person, but luckily we've got that third person because Aaron's friend isn't very happy that we went without him. I mean, he's proper kicking off. Aaron sent him a message when we were on our way back from Winter's Gibbet and he kicked off, and it's now Thursday, and every day he keeps having to go at Aaron for not inviting him, so he's definitely up for it. Obviously, once we get a bit more freedom from Monday, we can start involving other people. But as I say, we don't really want massive groups, you know. But we will sort out investigations where we will invite you, the listeners, to come with us. But we'll maybe send you off in twos and stuff like that, or even by yourself. Probably not by yourself, going back to the safety aspect and stuff like that, but it'll probably like in twos. We might do when we say by yourself, what I mean is we might do the bit where you are in a room by yourself, but not actually investigating by yourself. But that's all something that we need to look at in the future, and it will come, but we're not there yet. So anyway, so the 6 categories are shadow hauntings, residual hauntings, and animal spirit haunting. Now I often see this. People often question, has anybody seen a ghost animal? Because it doesn't tend to be something that's broadcast very much. When somebody takes a photograph of something, it tends to be a demon rather than just an animal. Intelligent hauntings, poltergeist hauntings, and of course, Ed's favourite, demonic hauntings. So let's break each one of them down, shall we? So we'll start with a shadow haunting. So what is a shadow haunting? Shadow haunting is a very common type of haunting that many of us will have experienced. Perhaps you've woken up suddenly in the night and seen a dark figure stand over the foot of your bed. Those who have experienced this type of haunting call the figures either shadow people or shadow creatures. These aren't ghosts or spirits as such. They're more like a feeling that you've been watched, or like someone is in the room with you. It's often a shadowy mass or figure seen in your peripheral vision in a fleeting glance or out of the corner of your eye. As I said earlier, I've had the supposedly shadow people experiencing the fact that I've seen something. I actually, where I sit whilst presenting this show, to my right is the doorway to the room, and outside of that doorway is a passageway which leads to my bathroom. So I can see directly, if I turn to my right, I can see directly down this passageway to my bathroom. Now there's many a time I've sat here presenting either the paranormal experience or the Paddy McGough show, and I've seen something in that passageway out of the corner of my eye. But then when I've looked, there was nothing there. The shadow people, as people would say. So I have had that experience. I've had it elsewhere as well. I've been watching the telly and I've seen something, out of the corner of my eye. I've never seen anything at the bottom of my bed, but I have seen things out of the corner of my eye. But I'm sure there's a medical reason for that. Could be wrong though. So the apparitions, which are said to be able to pass through walls, are sometimes described as hooded figure in darkness or humanoid forms. They have no facial features. They vary in size from that of a child to an adult, but paranormal researchers believe they are not the spirits of humans. A shadow haunting can also occur in the form of an unidentified shadow. This can be a normal looking shadow of a human in a room when there is no one present to cast that shadow. It can also occur as a drop in the output of light, as if being blocked by an unseen mass. Now, I have again experienced a similar thing but I mean it could be just an electrical fault where the bulb in my living room dulls. It doesn't dull for 5-10 minutes, but it does dull for a bit and then re-brightens back up again. So it's not like it dulls and then comes straight back up again. It dulls for maybe 20-30 seconds and then relights again. So I've had that sort of experience where the light is sort of dulled but then gone up again. I have experienced that sort of stuff. So as we say, it could be the light being blocked out by an unseen mass. It could be the light dulling, as I've just said. Parapsychologists believe that sightings. Now, parapsychology you can actually study. Unlike demonology and ghost hunting and this, that, and the other. Parapsychology you can actually study, and you can get a degree in parapsychology, because parapsychology doesn't just deal with the paranormal, although its name suggests, because it's parapsychology, that's what they deal with. They don't just deal with the paranormal, so therefore you can do a degree in parapsychology. So anyway, parapsychologists believe that sightings of shadow people are an example of pareidolia, our subconscious tendency to turn random patterns into identifiable objects such as the man on the moon, or in this case, someone in the shadows. This is why they are more frequently seen in peripheral vision and seem to disappear when looked at. Exactly what I was saying earlier on. I look out of the corner of my eye, I see something in this passageway, I look and it's not there. Why my body or why my eye is picking something out, if we go down what the parapsychologists are saying, why the corner of my eye is doing all this pareidolia stuff when I'm not looking at it, I've got no idea. But that's what parapsychologists say. Now, parapsychologists do deal with that and mental health and this, you know. So they obviously deal with the unknown, what your mind does. You know, panic attacks. I know we've mentioned, you know, Emily's panic attacks on a night time when she sleeps. I know other people, PTSD sufferers and things like that, have panic attacks. I mean, my daughter suffers from anxiety, you know, and she has really bad attacks with it. And that's the sort of thing that a parapsychologist would deal with. You know, because obviously there's nothing there. I mean, there's nothing attacking Emily on a night time when she's in bed. The PTSD sufferers, there's nothing happening to them. They're not in a war zone. And same with my daughter, there's nothing for her to panic about, but she goes into has a panic attack with her anxiety, and that's what parapsychologists deal with. The problem is, because it's got psychologist at the end of it, if you mention psychologist to somebody, then people instantly think that you know, there's something wrong with you, because that's the way society has grown up. A psychologist is somebody who, you know, deals with the insane and whatever, but that's not always the case, because it might not be that you're insane, you just might be suffering from, you know, anxiety, panic attacks, whatever, PTSD, you know, but there we go. Other common causes for this might be the headlights from the traffic passing outside a property, creating an unusual shadow, or insects or pets passing in front of a light source or window. Now, you see this all the time, don't you, on videos of night cameras. You know, somebody go, oh, look at that flying past, you know, that must be the ghost of me, you know, me long lost brother or whatever. And it could be just a fly getting caught in the light and, you know, being reflected onto or being recorded onto the camera. You know, so you do get this all the time. People who see things such as, you know, things on the cameras, etc. So you can eliminate these causes by closing curtains or blinds to stop outside influences. Now, if you were to lie in my bedroom, then every car that drives past would cause some sort of light, because I sleep with my blinds open, my curtains open. So you can, I mean, I obviously sleep upstairs, so, you know, it's not like people can look into my bedroom, but I can look out of my bedroom and I can see people walking past in this side, you know. So, but that's just the way I am. So obviously, if I get, you know, reflections of lights and things like that, it could be that. But remember, as I've always said, it could also be the paranormal, because I will never rule out the paranormal. I just don't believe in the paranormal, but I'll never ever rule it out, because I don't know. I'm not the expert, so how do I know? I just don't believe in the paranormal. Now, people say, how can you not believe in the paranormal, do a paranormal show? I mean, I actually just had this conversation yesterday with somebody. How can you not believe in the paranormal, but do a paranormal show? Well, because I have an open mind. So I'm willing to accept if the paranormal is there, that it's there. I'm not one of these, I don't go, ghosts, yeah, of course. I personally don't believe in them, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. It's like turning around to somebody and saying that you don't believe in God. Some people don't believe in God. That's that's up to them. Others believe in God. What I will never, ever, ever do, and these are the people that annoy me, is I will never disrespect a believer in the paranormal. But I also expect the same respect back. Rather than saying, you don't know what you're talking about, ghosts do exist. Of course they do, because I've seen them. You've seen what you believe was a ghost. Until there's definitive proof. The giant squid, the gorilla, were cryptozoology in their time, in the fact that nobody had ever seen one. Or some people hadn't seen one. So when people talked about the gorilla, especially in Europe, people were like, nah, they don't exist. But this person had seen this gorilla, was telling people, I've seen this thing, and they were like, no, it doesn't exist, you're an idiot, you don't know what you're talking about. Then they discovered that the gorilla was real. Could be exactly the same with the ghost. Somebody can tell me they've seen a ghost, I could say, of course you haven't, you're talking out the top of your head, and then we get definitive proof, like they did with the gorilla, and it obviously becomes real then, and you have no choice. You can now no longer say you don't believe in a gorilla, because gorillas do exist. I physically have seen gorillas. Most of the people listening to this show have probably physically seen a gorilla. So therefore you can't turn around and say to somebody, if you haven't seen a gorilla, you can't turn around to somebody and go, no, gorillas don't exist, because they do. So anyway, before we move on to residual hauntings, I'm going to give you a cabinet of curiosities. So I'll see you in about, let's have a look, about 8 minutes it is. So I shall see you shortly.
Our world is full of the unexplainable. And if history is an open book, all of these amazing tales are right there on display, just waiting for us to explore. Welcome to the Cabinet of Curiosities. On June 14th of 1494, the authorities showed up to arrest her. I realized that it might have come as a shock to her, but for all her neighbors and the community beyond them, it had only been a matter of time. Justice would eventually win the day. Her crime was murder. Just a little over 2 months prior, on Easter Sunday, in fact, she had walked into the home of her neighbors, the Lafonts, and found the place empty. Well, not entirely. There was a cradle off to one side of the main room, and in it slept the family's youngest son. I'm not sure I fully understand why she did what she did next, but some people simply make bad choices. She chose to harm the boy, as horrible as that sounds, and as a result of his injuries, the boy died. Whether or not that was her intent is irrelevant. She was guilty of murder, and so they came to arrest her. The trial was swift. So many people came forward to testify against her that her guilt was without question. Still, witnesses were examined and cross-examined. Testimonies were heard. The judge deliberated and then returned to the courtroom to declare his verdict. Guilty. Her sentence was execution, specifically by hanging. So a gallows was hastily built nearby, and preparations were made. On the appointed day, she was led to the wooden platform by strong men. Her hands and feet were bound, and a noose was slowly fitted around her neck. And then, After a pronouncement by a priest, the trapdoor was opened and she fell. I wish I could offer a happy ending to this story, that at the last minute a witness came forward to reverse the charges, or that the noose snapped and the killer was given a second chance. But this isn't one of those stories. No, the killer was guilty, and she hanged for her crime. The end. I suppose in that way this story isn't really anything special. Sadly, the pages of history are filled with the names of killers, and most of them met a similar fate. But this story has one small difference that deserves to be pointed out. The killer, you see, was special. No, she wasn't a queen, or a celebrity, or even well off. She wasn't even human. She was a pig. He was failing all of his classes, and that meant his plan was working. Before long, he would be expelled, and everything would be okay. That probably doesn't make a lot of sense right now, so perhaps we need to take a step backwards. Ed didn't have the best of luck, no matter how he tried, and it started young, too. By the age of 3, both of his parents were gone, leaving him an orphan. Thankfully, some friends of the family took Ed in and raised him as their own. Even that was riddled with trouble, though. As he grew older, Ed started to fall out with his adoptive parents. They fought constantly, and not all of it could be chalked up to the headbutting between strict parents and angst-ridden teens. The fact was, his father was a bit of a jerk. The guy was rich, you see, but he refused to share that wealth with his family. Which is why it was ironic when Ed's father sent him to college to get him out of the house and end the quarreling, because he didn't send the young man away with any cash. Ed was a smart guy, and he did well during his first term, but those classes were expensive, and since he was broke, the debt just sort of added up. When Ed asked his father later for the money to pay off his school debts, the man pulled him out of college instead. With one door closed to him, the young man had to find a different path. A few weeks later, he enlisted in the Army, which came with a little pay and a lot of commitment, but nothing close to a college education. He stuck with it for 2 years before begging his father to help him go back to school. And it worked. Ed's dad helped the man get into West Point, of all places, and for a while it seemed that everything was going to be all right. But again, he did all of this without his father's money, so of course the debts returned. At one point, the school sent him a letter asking for payment, and Ed replied that he kept trying to ask his father for the cash, but the man was drunk a bit too often. So West Point did something sneaky. They forwarded Ed's letter to his father. Naturally, the man was embarrassed and upset, but he also paid the debt off. Oh, and then he disowned Ed and cut off all communication with him, which was unfortunate, because Ed needed his father's permission to withdraw his enrollment from the school. So there you go. That's why Ed was purposefully failing his classes at West Point. He didn't want to stick around. In fact, he couldn't afford to. So he needed to do everything in his power to make his time there as short as possible. He stopped going to classes. He stopped going to the required chapel gatherings, even stopped eating. But after a while, the school caught on, and because West Point is a military college, they arrested him and then dismissed him for negligence of duty. Ed did all right, though. Life would continue to be tough for him, but he poured that pain and suffering into his true passion, writing. Over the next 18 years, he would build a name for himself, and while he would never again be on good terms with his father, John Allen, he would carry the man's name with him for the rest of his short life. Ed, you see, was one of America's first literary celebrities, and we still read his work today. So be thankful that his father disowned him, and that West Point kicked him out of college, because without those failures, the world might never have met Edgar Allan Poe.
It's been a running theme, hasn't it? Because the last two stories have had authors. There was Mark Twain, then there was Agatha Christie, and now Edgar Allan Poe, who are influenced by strange events, etc. So yeah. So let's get back to the residual hauntings. So what is a residual haunting? I hear you say. Well, I don't actually hear you say it all, do I? But residual hauntings are a common type of haunting, although witnesses of residual hauntings aren't seeing a ghost or a spirit. Witnesses are actually experiencing the residual psychic or emotional energy of a person or an event that took place at that location in the past. For this reason, residual hauntings are sometimes called place memories. Now, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, I spoke about this and how there was the theory that an event can be recorded in a building or something like that because of water. So that's what a residual haunting is. It's the recording of an event or a person in a place. So residual hauntings are an imprint of energy that has been left behind by someone who has suffered a tragic, traumatic, premature death, usually a murder, a suicide, or even an execution. Which is what I was saying about Winter's gibbet. He wasn't executed at the gibbet, he was just displayed. So is his spirit there? I mean, Diane brought up the fact of, is it the original gibbet? And it isn't. So could that be the reason why, we saw nothing? Could it just be that he didn't turn up that particular night? Or is it because his spirit is doing residual hauntings at Newgate in Newcastle, which is where he was executed? Because although it's a traumatic event to have your body on display, he was already dead when he arrived there. He'd been pronounced dead after the execution, and it was his dead body that was displayed there. So was there any residual energy for him to be there? Have the sightings, and it's not like there's been lots of sightings, it's just a couple of people have said they've seen things. Have the sightings just been because of what it is? And they think they've saw something. We never got anything, never felt anything, never recorded anything. I've listened to the EVP, which I'm actually going to upload the audio of, and all you'll hear is me talking exactly the same as I am on the video that's on Facebook, because obviously it was recording my voice. I suppose it proves that it was working because it was recording my voice, but we didn't actually get anything. But if you hear anything, let us know. So if you listen to it and you hear something and you go, oh, when you said such and such there was a noise, and please let us know and we'll have a re-listen. But I couldn't hear nothing. So the energy used by the body and the brain is resistant death. It can be so immense that those events can be played either on the anniversary of the event, when atmospheric conditions are very similar to the event that happened, or when someone is susceptible or in tune with that energy. I suppose we're going down the mediumship and clairvoyant route, which we do actually have a medium from Bolton who is quite willing to come on the show and have a chat and whatever. But obviously I'll tell you more about that when it happens. So this phenomenon is known as stone tape theory, due to the belief that the energy is captured and stored like a video recording in the surrounding bricks, wood, stone, and possibly even the soil when the conditions are right. These materials release this energy and you see the event occur in the exact same position as it did many years ago. A residual haunting represents nothing more than a reflection of the past. You can't communicate with them. The vision seen are not aware of their surroundings. They can't interact with you and are not aware of your presence. They are both benign and non-threatening. So this is exactly going back there a couple of weeks when I did mention this about the recordings. Because it's a recording of an event or whatever, then it is literally just that event. So you could see, if it was somebody that you knew, you could say, "Oh, Paddy," and I would completely ignore you. But I'm not ignoring you, I just don't know you're there. So that's what a residual haunting is. So it can be a vision, but it can also be the sound of footsteps or other noises being replayed from the past. It can also be a sense of foreboding in a particular room or location where something traumatic has occurred. Now, and they're going to get mentioned a lot, Ed and Lorraine Warren, and the reason is, as I said earlier on, they were the king and queen of the paranormal. You know, everybody looked up to Ed and Lorraine, who had anything to do with the paranormal, and Lorraine was very susceptible to something like that. I mean, we mentioned the case that she did where she helped the police solve the crime. Whether it was true or not, you know, I mean, obviously that's yet to be defined. But, you know, she felt the trauma of the actual crime taking place and was therefore able to tell the police stuff that led to the arrest of the perpetrators. She also tells the tale of feeling a traumatic event on a hunt for the Sasquatch. She went to the place where a hunt was taking place, and one of the people informed her that they'd injured this Sasquatch, and then she says that she made a connection with the Sasquatch, and you know, and felt the trauma of the pain that this and the fear, because you know this thing, whatever it may be, would obviously, you know, if you're hunting, if you're being hunted by something, you're going to feel fear. Again, whether she was telling the truth or not, we don't know. But you know, she describes the fear. So you know, that could come under the sense of foreboding in a particular area. So the vision will always occur in the same place, often at the same time each day. So it's like I was saying before, if you go to somewhere at 9 o'clock in the morning, but the visitation or the manifestation or whatever doesn't happen till 10 p.m. at night, then you're wasting your time. Because if it always happens at the same time, I know the Grey Lady, the story of Beamish Hall, it was said that she appears at midnight on the bridge outside of Beamish Hall. So it'd be no good going there at 12 midday because she wouldn't be there. You know, you could stand there all day at 12 midday and you would get nothing from it. But if you stand there at 12 o'clock, then, you know, you may be able to see it. But going back to this, which is a residual haunting, you would not be able to interact. So therefore, if I went with my spirit box, my EVP, and this, that and the other, and stood there asking them questions, they wouldn't interact with me because it's a residual haunting. So it has to be a spirit that is able to speak to us to be able to capture it. So if we go back to Winter's Gibbet, and as I say, I'll mention that a few times, I tried talking to William. Now, if his spirit is there and it's just there hanging, and it's his dead spirit, as in the spirit of his dead body, then I would never get an interaction with it. You know. So, is that another reason why I got nothing? We'd have to look into that further. So this is why residue hauntings are seen to pass through doors, which have since been bricked up, and even walk up long gone flights of stairs. Now in Durham Castle, I believe it is, there's supposed to be a ghost that walks down the stairs, but it's only half a ghost. And when the question was asked about that, it's because the staircase was lower than the staircase that's there now. So the person, the residual haunting, is walking down the original staircase, which is below the height of the now staircase. So that's why you can only see half of the person. It's the same as there's a one down in Cornwall, I believe it is, of a Roman legion, and they walk along the original road, which is lower than the base of the cellar that they walk through. So I think it's you can only see them from the knees up over, because from the knees down would be below the surface that is there now. So that's what a residual haunting is. It would appear at the same place doing the same thing over and over again. But if that place has changed, then you wouldn't see it. They wouldn't walk across the cellar floor. This Roman legion wouldn't walk across the cellar floor because the floor wasn't there. So they wouldn't be walking on that floor. So, you know, and as I say, I'm sure it's Durham Castle, I could be wrong, but I'm sure it's Durham Castle where the ghost is said to be half of the person. The ghost is half coming down the stairs, but it's because the stairs are lower than what they were. There are frequent reports of apparitions walking with only upper parts of their legs or bodies visible due to the change in level of the ground over the years. They may also be seen to float above the ground. Again, if something is lower, then you've got the opposite, haven't you? They're walking across something. So if them new stairs were lowered, then this person would walk down the stairs, but it would look like they weren't walking down the actual stairs. They would look like they were floating above them. It's not known whether these events replay for everyone or just those who are open to these types of energies or who have physical abilities. Psychic abilities. Physical abilities? Psychic abilities. How it is known that they occur more commonly in older buildings. This is most likely because older buildings contain more stone, wood and natural elements, so therefore, you know, the events are recorded on there, whereas the newer buildings tend to be plaster and stuff like that. So we'll do animal spirits, and Diane says yes, in Durham Castle she went on a tour and the guide said half lady walked around her floor, not on ours. Yeah, so the floor was obviously heightened, and therefore the ghost would walk around on the floor that was originally there and not the floor that's there now. So if it had been lowered, or if the new floor was higher, then you get half the person. If the floor was lower than the old, that's how they would float. So that's how ghosts float, basically, is what they're saying. So yeah. So we'll talk about animals, spirit hauntings for tonight, to end tonight, should I say, sorry. So most accounts of hauntings from eyewitness revolve around dark, shadowy figures that take human form. Grey ladies, I mentioned the Grey Lady from Beamish Hall, monks and soldiers. But as animals are so woven into our lives and human history, they also sometimes appear as ghosts. There is famous reports of the ghost of a monkey at Carew Castle. Hope I'm saying that right for all you Welsh listeners. Carew Castle in Wales, and even the Tower of London is said to be haunted by a ghost bear. But the animals most commonly seen as ghosts are horses. We mentioned, you know, just in passing about the headless horseman, but obviously, you know, horses do tend to have suffered, especially on battlefields, because they were took in the battle, weren't they? Pulling ghostly carriage, or even with a headless horseman on their back. In some cases, the horse and rider die together, but this is not always the case. Because it's not, is it? I mean, the horse can die without the owner. I mean, you see it in films, or you see it portrayed in films, where the horse gets killed by an explosion, but the rider just gets thrown off the horse and, you know, carries on with the battle and whatever. And that's the sort of thing that would happen. Or, you know, the Grand National is another prime example. A horse jumps over something, like, such as, you know, a hurdle in the Grand National, falls to the ground, and ends up having to be put down and stuff like that. So the animals tend to obviously die more than the riders, but it can happen where they both die. So the reason horses are so commonly seen in ghosts is because they're just one of a handful of animals to have achieved a level of sentience, making them capable of manifesting in the physical realm from beyond the grave. A 2016 study found that horses are more emotive than a lot of animals. Researchers found that horses react differently to seeing photographs of happy and angry facial expressions. It's like the dog, isn't it? You could say to a dog, "Come here," whilst I punch you in the face in a nice way, and it'll still come to you. But if you were to say to the dog, "Come here whilst I give you a cuddle," in an angry way, it would run away from you. So it's the same with the horse. A horse can determine, because of their sentience, they know what's going on, and that's what sentience is. It's the knowledge of what's going on around you, and horses apparently do that. Primates also high on the list of emotive animals, which could explain the monkey at Karoo. Of course, monkeys are pretty rare in towns and cities, so it's unlikely we'd see large quantities of ghost primates. The ghosts of animals could be a result of stone tape theory, but it may not be emotions of psychic energy of the animals that's been recorded, but actually the physical materials around the haunting. It could be our emotional response to animals which have been captured and go on to create animal operations. So what they're saying is, it's not necessarily the animal that you're seeing. It could be your emotive state. So if a dog passes away, which I'm sure most of them have experienced, at least a pet, whether it be a dog or a cat or whatever, but I'm sure most of them have experienced an animal passing away. You could be so emotive over that animal passing that you form the apparition rather than the animal itself forming the apparition. So it's you seeing that rather than, you know, it being there. It's you making the apparition happen. In the case of a long dead soldiers riding apparitions of their trusty steed across foreign battlefields, it may be human psychic energy that is binding the vision of a horse to the location. After all, the ghost soldiers are able to conjure up supernatural reconstruction of their own clothing. Clothes clearly are not sentient or alive in any sense. Now, this is something that I heard somebody mention once, because I do watch a lot of and read a lot of paranormal stuff, especially since starting this show. So I do watch a lot of stuff, and one of them said, when you get up in the morning, you could be choosing, you know, and you get dressed, you could be choosing the clothes that you are going to spend the rest of your life in. Because if you pass away that day, then, you know, you're going to be wearing them clothes. Soldiers obviously wore civilian clothing as well as uniform, but if they die in a battlefield, then they're always seen wearing their uniform. So that's what they were saying, you know, if you were to die that day, then that would be your uniform for the rest of your life. So whatever you put on, so the next time you put on a pair of jogger pants and a t-shirt or whatever, and you know, that could be what you end up wearing. It was a strange thing to say, but when you think about it, it makes sense that if you do pass that day and spirit the spirit world's real and whatever, that is what's going to happen. You are going to be manifested as wearing that particular clothing. You know, it's not too much of a stretch of the imagination, as there are tales of ghostly horses complete with carriages, and it's not just wooden carriages that exist as ghosts. Stories of ghost trains and even ghost ships are common. These were never living things, so in order for them to exist, we must agree that it is human consciousness which is manifest in these inanimate, soulless objects. There was a famous story about a ghost ship. Sadly, we haven't got time to go into it in full detail, but basically, there's a ship that was saw, and the people from the ship that saw it actually went aboard the ship, so they actually stood physically on the ship. They got the information from the ship, etc. And then they didn't have the capability, or the ship was too small. But anyway, there's a reason why they couldn't tow the ship back to shore. So they dropped the anchor of the ship, marked the area on the map where it was, and returned to shore to get a bigger ship so that they could then go back and tow the ship back to the harbour. When they got back, the ship wasn't there. They then looked at a list of ships. I mean, I don't know what it's called. I know the list of people on a ship are called the manifest, but I don't know what a list of ships are called. But whatever. They then looked and have searched for the ship, and there's no record ever been of this ship. And yet these people swear that they physically stood on this ship. And yet there's no record of this ship ever existing. I'll have to look the story up for you for one paranormal night. But yeah, there's an actual ghost ship that doesn't exist. Ghost trains, you sometimes hear of ghost trains and what have you. So, they're obviously manifestations of the human mind. So that's took us. We've covered two of the classifications of hauntings. We've still got intelligent hauntings, poltergeist hauntings, demonic hauntings. So what I'm going to do is on a Wednesday I'll concentrate on ghost stories, or stories from the paranormal, and on the Thursday we'll carry on with this course and what have you. There is make sure that you've been taking notes, because there is a quiz at the end. So anyway, I'll be back with the Paddy McGough Show on Sunday. So please tune in. That's from 8. The paranormal experience will now be 9 till 11 on a Wednesday, 9 till 11 on a Thursday, and it will be every other Saturday, but not in a fortnight's time. Unlike what I said on the video, it'll not be the next one won't be until in August. Is probably the easiest way of saying it, but I will let you know exactly when that's going to be. I'm not going to. I don't want to reveal where the place is until we've gotten there, and or until we've done the investigation. And the reason being is, now I don't want to cast aspersions, but people could turn up and obviously spoil the investigations, and that's what I don't want. So until Sunday, it's good night from me, and I'll see you then. I don't know why it took me so long to say that. But yeah, I'll see you all on Sunday from 8 p.m.